Hey everybody, welcome back to artofdino.com, and this is Tartarian Tales number 81, and I have got this one from the Sun newspaper, November 24th, 1889. And I'm always looking for things in the papers that, maybe someone put out an article that, was maybe they went a little too far, they weren't supposed to, or they released a little bit of information that they shouldn't have, or there was a source that, maybe occurred once in a paper and never occurred again and is radically different from what we've been taught or whatever. So I'm always looking for things like that. And this one is amazing and has so many different little tiny elements of the Tartar culture and world in the 1800s that I'd never heard before, and so I had to share it with you all. Really nice. There's a lot of names. It's very intricate, very intense, and it's not that long, which is great as well. But it's about China's dynasty changing. The Empress Dowager, a Chinese and not a Tartar. A new spirit of contentment prevails in the flowery kingdom in consequence explanation of the Tartar rule. So it goes into some things that I've always been curious about. And it's like, how did the Tartars rule the Chinese from a distance? What kind of things did they, how, because they were both such great empires, how did they kind of go back and forth with their powerful rule? And what were the implications of that? What were the intentions of it? Everything surrounding that I've always been really curious about, especially as you start looking in the papers and you see a lot of things about like the emperor being like chased out of Peking, and all these, the siege of Peking. So many different historical events happen in the 1800s newspapers and relating to the Tartar culture, and it is before they completely decided to eviscerate it from our history and not tell anyone about it. So they still had the prestige and all these different things in the past that we don't hear today, and this one is a gem. So here we go. This article is awesome, and again, I said the title. It's called China's Dynasty Changing, the Empress Dowager, a Chinese and not a Tartar, and a new spirit of contentment prevails in the flowery kingdom, in consequence explanation of the Tartar rule. So take a listen to this and enjoy the art, mostly AI, but I'll probably slide a couple of mine in there and some pictures, so enjoy it all. Here we go. Chinese laws prohibit the printing of the lives and doings of living persons, which I also found very interesting. Kind of like the Native Americans didn't want their picture taken. Kind of similar how they both have certain things have survived time, and I wonder if the connection is partially proven via those kind of things. But here we go. As regards royalty, this rule is most severely enforced. The acts of the emperors and of their families must not be printed during the entire reign of the dynasty. Here is an interesting story concerning one of the principal members of the present imperial family. So that either means a lot of stuff they may have shared and published in the past could have been lies again, and again, that's a smart thing for an empire to do, is not tell their secrets. Like our country nowadays, where our joke government just like lets out plans for everything around the entire world. So it's absolutely foolish. These guys had a much better plan and everything set in motion to be a strong empire. We are not that today. So here we go. About 1856, when Zheng Kuo-yan, a near relative of Zheng Kuo-fan, the famous general who suppressed the Taiping rebels by recapturing Nanking, was governor-general of the province of Kwangtung, a timid but pretty little girl was taken to him by some of her relatives to be sold as a slave. She was only 11 or 12 years of age. Her manner was gentle and tame. Madame Zheng, the governor's wife, a kind-hearted woman, bought her. Little Qi Shi appreciated Madame Zheng's kindness and began at once to do all things to please her mistress, and soon, by her diligence as well as by her amiable ways, she not only made the madam love her, but even the old governor was delighted. Qi Shi progressed rapidly, both physically and intellectually. At 16, she was as beautiful a young girl as could be found in the province, and accomplished in letters and music. Governor Zheng was more than proud of her, so were the rest of the family, but there was one thing puzzled them all. What were they going to do for pretty Qi Shi? To find her a suitor among the first families of the land was impossible, owing to the prejudice of rich husbands against big-feet wives. To give her in marriage to a poor youth would rob her of her luxuries. That same year, the governor's term of office expired, and according to custom, he had to report in person to the throne. It was likewise the custom for retiring governors to bring some presents as a token of their great respect for the emperor. But what was Governor Zheng to take to his majesty? Ah, said the governor, as a happy thought struck him. There, why not ask Qi Shi to be an imperial concubine, a constant companion to his imperial majesty, the Emperor Hing Feng? The governor asked his good old wife, and she broached the subject to Qi Shi. The latter consented. His Majesty Emperor Hien Feng was then almost an old man, and yet he was so pleased with his extraordinary present that he conferred a still higher degree upon the already influential Zheng Guo Yun. The latter being a Tartar, the emperor took it for granted that young Miss Qi Shi was likewise of that nationality, especially when he saw that she had natural feet, for such is the custom with the Tartar ladies of high rank. They don't bind them in Tartar. Qi Shi was duly installed as a member of the imperial harem and became the imperial favorite. In due time she gave birth to a son. For this honor, the emperor immediately made her an empress. Upon the death of Hien Feng in 1862, it was discovered that his only other son was disqualified for the throne by reason of his wife giving birth to a child within 3 years after the death of his own mother. Interesting. This was considered unfilial, as, according to custom, all dutiful sons should be praying and fasting for the space of 3 years to mourn the loss of their greatest friend, a mother, instead of raising a family, as seemed to have been the case with this unfortunate prince. I really like that. That is because I absolutely love my mother, and that is an interesting concept, is to have 3 years of fasting and mourning the loss of their greatest friend, a mother. I really like that. That's very nice. I love some of these old customs that I wish were preserved, and they're just so opposite from our just degraded family that they're pushing on us now. It's communism. It's disgusting. All right, here we go. Teng Qi, the son of Qi Shi, was then only 5 years old. He was the next legal heir to Hien Feng's great throne, and by the acclamations of the ministers, he was immediately made the emperor. His mother, Qi Shi, was made regent during his minority. For 280 years previous to this time, the ministers of the courts of the emperors of the Tartarian Dynasty were all Tartars. The highest offices which Chinamen could obtain were those of governors. For this, the Chinese colleges refused to grant to a Tartar the noble order of Cheng Yuan. Had the ministers of Emperor Hien Feng known that Teng Qi's mother was a Chinawoman, they would never have dared to crown him emperor. The sagacious empress kept her own counsel. Li Hung Chang, the Histuarch of the Bismarck of China, and the present prime minister. He is also a Chinaman, and he owes his place to the influence of Qi Shi, the emperor's mother. This post has been filled by Tartars since the conquest. To still the hue and cry which they raised against the elevation of a native to that place, she induced Li Hung Chang to grant the Tartars the long-coveted degree of Cheng Yuan. With this mighty general at the head of the army and navy, she ventured for the first time to reveal her true nationality. Soon after this, a commission was sent by the emperor to find his only uncle, Qi Shi's younger brother, who was then already past the summer of his years. He was serving as a farmhand on a small estate in the province of Guangdong. His earnings amounted to $7 a year. Ah Dong had almost forgotten that he ever had a sister. A band of men in gorgeous raiment found him in the fields. 2 imperial commissioners of great rank led them. As these approached the frightened farmer, they threw themselves on their knees, crying, "Taiyin him sway," or Lord of a million years, and carried him off in a great chair of state to the nearest Yumon, or court. Here they changed his garments and treated him with great respect, but it took 2 days to convince him that he was the uncle of the great emperor. Teng Qi died at the age of 18. Quang Sui, the present boy emperor, a son of a half-brother or Teng Qi, is also a Chinaman. His father was a nobleman. He succeeded by adoption. Mother Regent Qi Shi wields the same power with him as she did over Teng Qi. Owing to the lack of printed matter concerning Chinese royalties and the conservative disposition of the officials, few, if any, foreigners know anything of authentic character concerning the relations of the Chinese and the usurpers of their throne, the Tartars. This is some good stuff here. It is often wondered at by Americans that an empire of over 400 million people could be so easily contented to be ruled by only a few 100,000 of roving bands of wild Tartars. It's probably because the information is lost and the reality of the situation is a little bit lost. But either way, continue this. I mean, that's what Americans think. They're constantly given the wrong information about the other side of the world. So here he goes. So I'm going to read that one again because it's important. It is often wondered at by Americans that an empire of over 400 million people could be so easily contented to be ruled by only a few 100,000 of roving bands of wild Tartars. That there is a great secret of this miraculous power of the Tartar dynasty over its great vassal empire is made evident by the facts of the Chinese devotion and sincerity to the welfare of the present dynasty. Here are the secrets of the Tartar conquest of China. The conditions were published in the Xin Yu Kel, a sort of constitutional history of the present dynasty. I'd like to get my hands on that, of which I can only roughly quote through memory. So here we go. First, as a sign of subjugation to their conquerors, the Chinese must wear the queue and shave the crown of their heads like the soldiers of Yuan Qing Wang, the conqueror, and discard the flowing robes of the great Ming to wear those shared by Tartars. Second, the Tartars shall rule only the male population of China, while the women remain the subjects of their own husbands, and that none of them be permitted to marry Tartars. Interesting. Third, the offices of Chu Qing Shan and Yu Qing Shan, or Premier and General-in-Chief of the Empire, are to be unfilled only by Tartars, or are to be filled only by Tartars, while the balance of the political offices are equally divided between the two nationalities, Chinese and Tartars alike. Very awesome. See, they have a certain method of control so that they can govern a massive population from afar because they're smart, they're powerful, and they offered something that the people apparently liked to some extent. And to revenge upon their conquerors for taking away practically all the important offices of the realm, the Iterati, or ruling class of China, made and dictated the fourth condition, namely their old law that no men of either party were eligible to any offices of honor except by regular literary competitions, and denied their conquerors the famous degree of Chun Yuan, the highest and most distinguished honor that can be conferred upon man by his people and his rulers, thus forcing their conquerors to drop the sword for the pen, and also forcing them to follow Chinese habits, such as the worshipping of ancestors and other religious peculiarities of the Chinese. The Chinese are sneaky. They're very smart. That's why they are just crushing the American government forces, who just are pathetic and can be bought by a couple pennies. These guys in these ancient empires and civilizations and armies couldn't be bought so easily. They had a spiritual satisfaction and need that needed to be satisfied. They wouldn't just go turn their backs on that kind of magical, sacred stuff. They had very strong wills, I'll say. So here we go. Through sheer necessity, their conquerors accepted the terms, as otherwise the Chinese would rather exterminate themselves by suicide than be ruled by a race who had a different civilization than their own. See, it's very strong-willed. The famous Taiping Rebellion was started some 30 years ago by Wang Su-chuen, a rural schoolteacher of the province of Guangdong, more through the stupidity or rascalities of a little Tartar garrison than through any patriotic motives of the natives. Wang was driven to the wall by these soldiers who attempted to collect taxes even on the fowls of the schoolteacher's little garden. The latter, being an eloquent man, got the sympathy of all his neighbors. In driving their tormentors away, they unintentionally killed one of them, and through sheer fear of losing their own heads, they armed themselves, and thus began the famous war that nearly ended the great Ta Sing dynasty. It finally had to appeal to American and English volunteers to save it. Interesting. The sudden ascension to power of General Li Hung Chang into the heretofore sacred office of Chu Qing Shan, or Premier, created a big sensation in China at the time among people of both nations, and it set them talking. The installation of a pure-blooded Chinese into the offices of both Premier of the Empire and General-in-Chief of the armies of China happened just a little after the ascension of Emperor Tang. Qi upon the throne. Not until then did the people know that their empress mother was really a Chinese lady, and she was empress regent over her own son, with the result as given above. The present Ta Tsing dynasty will yet prove to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest dynasties China ever had. The only other one that is recorded in history was the Zhou dynasty of 800 years duration, under which the famous philosophers Confucius and Mencius were born. Mencius, interesting. Through these nearly 300 years rule in China, the Tartar dynasty has become almost Chinese itself, especially since Her Imperial Majesty Qi Shi became a member of that distinguished family over whom she still reigns supreme. Indeed, it has been said openly by the Chinese that had it not been for this fact, in the fact that General Li Hung Chang is occupying the exalted position of premier under the present state of feelings of the Chinese, the Tartar dynasty would have had its hands full of business in keeping the 18 provinces wanting their own throne back. As it is, China is contented and the Tartar dynasty is safe, and only peace, prosperity, and long life await the great Empress of China. Wow. So that again is 1889, and the stories, go from the mid 1800s as well. But this makes me think that what I kind of just described was how the Chinese and Tartars became one, and then maybe probably during the time when communism started to rise. God knows who was the spark, the purse behind that whole push. But once that started and they started getting rid of everything and the Reformation and all that stuff, they started erasing history and everything like that. I think the Chinese had probably more to do with the erasing of this Tartar history than anyone else. The Americans and the CIA definitely had a part in it for over here, but to erase this kind of history from the Chinese would take a massive feat, because that's hundreds of thousands of people with hundreds of thousands of sacred artifacts, things in their basement, treasures, different things that would probably all have to inevitably be destroyed in order to kind of get rid of this. And it would be easy in America because it happened on the other side of the world, but in China, that would have taken a great amount of effort. And it seems like this is how it happened. They just started mingling in and things started getting a little looser, and Tartars aren't allowed to do this, Chinese aren't allowed to do this, but then soon enough they are. They sneak in, they kind of, they did this, oops, and then it kind of just becomes less and less strict, and it forms, and then this thing kind of one disappears and the other just kind of takes over, and although they're both the same, the name changes, and so that is important. And the history changes always with each generation. So easy to erase the past. And so I hope you guys got something out of this. There's a few things that I'd never heard before. And again, this mid-1800s is when Tartar started to disappear from the books. The mid-1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, the process was pretty long, I have a feeling. So every little bit that we can find adds to the story. And again, that's the goal of these Tartarian tales. This one had a lot of different names and could be a little confusing, but read it over, look up some of the names, take a look at the article, and you will see that there's a lot of different avenues to dive into here. And the Empress Dowager wasn't even mentioned in this, although she was mentioned in the title, but again, not a Tartar, but yet they were ruled by Tartar. So who knows? It's just a kind of confusing mess. And again, when your country does not allow you to write down things about royalty and luxuries, it is even easier to erase a history that was never written down. So again, another thing learned from this. But either way, the old world is slipping away, and we're resurrecting it. We're bringing it back piece by piece and just finding out interesting things. And maybe they have already gotten rid of all the clues, but still there's something, whether we dig or whether in the private libraries. Again, their answers are there. So one day we'll find them out, but until then, we'll just keep learning a little bit at a time. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you all for your time. Check out artofdino.com. Support me by buying art. There's nothing better. Take me away from a full-time job and get me back into creating art forever. My true dream and vision for my life. Anyways, you all rock. Thank you. Adios. Bless you all.